Our liberties we prize, and our rights we will maintain. This is Iowa Civil Rights History Podcast, where we tell stories about the contribution Iowans and the state of Iowa has made to advance the civil rights movement. Past stories are being told, present actions will be highlighted, and preparation for the future will be discussed. Here is your host, Erick Nganyange.
Todd, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We are doing this right inside Todd's home.
Welcome to Minnesota.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. How long you been living in, what do you call, Maple Grove?
I live in Maple Grove, Minnesota. I've been living in Minnesota once I graduated from the great University of Iowa in 1989, and I've been up in Minneapolis ever since. And so I've been in and out of the city to the suburbs, back to the city, and then now I'm back in the suburb.
But you still going to Iowa
I go to Iowa quite a bit.
Yeah, because
a couple times a month.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you and I were talking before we start recording. So you grew up in Iowa, born and raised in Waterloo?
I was born in Virginia, Fort Belvoir, Virginia. I'm an Army brat, as they say. I was born in the DeWitt Hospital in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, where my father was stationed and my mom was in Baltimore teaching. At about 3 or 4 years old, we moved from Virginia to Iowa.
And then you guys moved to Waterloo?
Yep, moved to Waterloo.
Okay.
Yep.
Was your dad born in
He was
Virginia?
born in, he was actually from Iowa. So my dad grew up in Iowa, born and raised on the farm in New Sharon, Iowa.
You went to school in Waterloo, and where did you go to college after that?
So I I grew up in Waterloo, went to high school partially in Waterloo. Then my senior year, I went to expand my education. My last 2 years of high school, I went to a private boarding school in Indiana called La Lumiere, which you probably see on ESPN a lot these days. La Lumiere also produced the great comedian Jim Gaffigan and Chief Justice John Roberts.
Oh, really?
Supreme Court went to La Lumiere. So after I graduated from La Lumiere, then I went to University of Iowa, and I graduated.
Decided to go back home.
Because I had to go back home and graduated from University of Iowa in 1989, and then moved up here right after that.
Okay. What did you study?
Communications.
Oh, okay.
Yep, communications.
Okay. The Western Farm. I want to go back. Who was Thomas and Susannah Western?
So Thomas, well, I mean, if you go way back, what happened was in 1790 in Virginia, Abington, Virginia, my ancestors were about the way out of slavery. They traveled across the United States to Iowa with probably, don't know for sure why, but probably back then, if you think about it, a lot of homesteads were promised back then, and everybody was going out west. And so they took a covered wagon, and they settled in Iowa. They had settled in Mahaska County about 1863, and by 1864, they bought their first farmland of 80 acres. By 1866, they bought the second 80 acres to complete it. So there's 160 acres that was established in 1864. There began the Western legacy.
So would this be your great-grandfather?
I don't know the number. I think it's like great-grandfather times 4 or 5. So my son is a 6th generation, so it would probably be great-grandfather times 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And there were slaves. He was slave in Virginia.
Right. So in Virginia, 1790, he actually bought his way out of slavery for $700.
How did he do that? Where did he get the money?
Like most slaves back then, they worked their way off.
Labor, yeah.
Worked it off. And then he actually, as the story goes, he actually bought his wife and children out of slavery several years later.
And then they decided to come this way.
Right. So, I mean, we even have it down to Henry Lucas, who is related to me by marriage. During the Mexican-American War, he was a servant to Captain John Preston, who allowed him to earn enough money that he purchased his freedom in 1848 for $700. Wow. He spent 3 years as a gold prospector in California, then purchased the freedom of his wife and children in 1851 for $1,900. They moved to Montezuma, Iowa, which is Mahaska County, in 1859. And as memory now jogs me, they were encouraged to settle there by Robert Morrison, a man who he knew from the war. And then, by 1866, the Western farm legacy began.
Yeah. Oh, wow. 1859. That's not, because 5 years later, he's buying this
Right. And so you have to think
Big
about
land.
at the time, what was going on in the world at the time. You had the Emancipation Proclamation.
80,
You had the
63.
You had the Civil War.
Yep.
Then you had what we call now Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm.
The slaves had just learned in Texas
Yep.
that they were free. So think of the brave audacity to be able to, one, purchase land, trust the person that's selling you the
Yep.
land. Then once you're on the land, trust that nobody's going to come bother you. You know, as I've talked to my aunts and uncles, and the Western family was well respected in that community. They would help out neighbors. Neighbors would help out them. And they were well respected. Obviously, you had your issues here and there, but by and large, they were pretty open to live their lives and flourish and pass on legacy.
So he started off with 160 basically
Right,
acres.
right. And so that was the western side. Then the Henry Lucas side I mentioned, they settled.
Which that's your his wife.
That was my in-laws, because my original great-great-grandfather's, he married a woman that used to be married to the Henry Lucas side.
Okay.
But he had passed away. But by marriage, the Henry Lucas side and I related, and they actually settled 320 acres in 1866.
Ooh.
So the Western settled in 1864, 160 acres in Mahaska County. Then the Lucases settled 320 acres
1866.
in 1866 in a Pleasant Township near Ewart. And so today that has been passed down through the generations, where literally I just confirmed this morning that it is still owned by, the Lucas Western family through Marcus Benning.
Okay.
So Marcus Benning is a cousin of mine, and he still is a property owner of that.
Oh, wow. How many, because I was reading somewhere and I think I wrote it down, like from 1880, how many black farm were in, and then that started going down, just dwindling down tremendously until the 1990s.
Right.
How many black farmers?
So if you think about it, in 1944, 13 to 14% of the farmers were black. Today, it's less than 1.4%.
Wow.
And in Iowa, there are a total of 75 farmers of color in Iowa. Now, you take that 75 and you dissect it. There's, Asian and Native American, black. But as far as black traditional row crop farmers, and when I say traditional row crop farmers, I mean corn, soybeans, wheat, sorghum, there's 18 that own 100 or more acres. So we're one of those 18.
Yeah.
So if you look at those 18, there's my specific family. There's the Marcus Benning. He owns about another 160. Then you have another Western family that lives on the other side of us. They own about 160. That's 3. And then there is Bubba Harvey. That's 4. And then Marcus and Maurice White.
Yeah.
That's 5 that I know. So of the 18, I know 5, and 3 are my family members.
Wow. Your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather,
Right.
Thomas, came over here 1859, 1864. He's having 160 acres of land. Now, is he coming this way for the main sole purpose of farming? Or he just came over here and saw the opportunity in 1859 and he said, you know what? This might be the way out of poverty.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that if you go back and know your history of the Great Migration West, because it was the great last frontier.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to imagine that if the government was selling plots and they were encouraging people from the East to come out and settle this. And so I would have to imagine that's one of the draws that drew them out there.
From 160 in 1864, did that expand to any more acres, or did he just stay on 160?
Stayed on 160.
Okay. And so today, how many acres you guys own? Still 100?
No, so now we own 200 acres. So what happened there is, I look at it in chapters, right?
Yeah.
So the chapter where they settled, obviously, is chapter 1. And then through the years, where I really got involved is with my mom, with my dad and his sisters. Joyce Cook, Betty Smith, Charlene Montgomery, that's where I really pick it up and learn from them. So that's the fourth generation of family that was farming on there.
Yeah.
And so my grandfather and the grandmother, they raised their 4 kids. My dad was the baby boy, only boy on the family farm, and he had 3 older sisters. And so they thrived and flourished, and they went off to college. And, they were able to go to college. They had a good education. So all 3 of my dad's sisters settled in Waterloo. And my dad, he went off to college, but then he got drafted. So his college got interrupted through the draft. And so he got drafted, went out to Virginia, as I mentioned before. Him and my mom get married, have me. They settled in Waterloo. And in 1968, he became the first black supervisor at John Deere in Waterloo. So again, you have to understand in 1968, there were actually race riots in Waterloo from 1968 to 1971. So my father started in the foundry. Through sheer grit and determination, he worked his way up to become the first black supervisor at John Deere. And he would continue to work there for 41 years as an engineer, as a process engineer. And he was well revered, had a major impact to John Deere through cost-saving measures, department development. So as I say that, so then my father becomes prevalent at John Deere. And so he goes back and forth to Granddad's farm to help Granddad farm that farm. Waterloo and New Sharon, about an hour, half away. So he would go back and forth, help Granddad farm the farm. Then in 1974, my grandfather passed away from lung cancer. So at that point, because my parents are pioneers and there's no mountain too big or too valley too low, they said, what if we continue to work our jobs, raise our boys, and let's add this other farm and go travel an hour and a half away to find this other farm. So at the time, I'm about in 6th grade, 5th or 6th grade. So my father, we farmed both farms, which, by the way, he bought another farm right before my grandfather passed away. So now
how big was that one?
So that one was only 40 acres. So he has 40 acres in Waterloo, 160 acres in New Sharon. So what we would do is we would load up the semi with the tractor and everything we needed, and we would go down to New Sharon and I get a week out of school every year, so I loved it.
Yeah.
And we go down there and farm that farm. Me, him, my mom, and my brothers are kind of young at the time, but me, him, and my mom, and we would farm. It'd take about a week to do it. And then we'd come back. He'd go back to work, rest for a couple of days, and we'd farm the 40 acres up in Waterloo. So that was another chapter. But that went on for about 4 to 6 years. And then, time catches up. I mean, that's a hard pace to keep up.
It is.
So finally what we did was we rented out the 160 acres.
Okay.
And to this day, we still farm the 40 acres in Waterloo.
Okay, the 160 still run it?
Still we own it. And now one of the other things we learned is there's a lot, even though you don't do the manual work, there's a lot of business that goes on behind that. You finding your renters, making sure you're proper programs, making sure you're being good stewards of the land, all those types of things. So there's a lot of business that we do on the 160 acres.
Yeah.
And so today we rent that out, and then we farm the 40 acres in Waterloo.
Okay. Well, at the time when you guys were farming the 160, what was the main crop?
Corn and soybeans.
Corn. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And he took the whole week?
Yeah, it took about the whole week because you got
that's an all day job. Probably.
Yeah, you got to account for rain and bad weather and mechanical breakdowns, or you may be in the middle of it and you get an emergency call from work he had to go back for, or maybe one of us was sick. He could, so life happens that week. It's not.
Yeah, it's not just farming.
Right.
Did you fall in love with the farming, or was one of those things like, this is the farming business, I don't have no time to be falling in love or not falling in love?
No,
I'm in it.
No, I totally fell in love with it. I mean, I'd be the only kid in school. You know how you doodle on stuff? I'd be drawing tractors.
Oh, really?
I'd be in show and tell time. I would have John Deere books, and I'd show pictures of tractors, and I would teach the kids what a combine was, what a disc was, what a planter was. And so I've definitely fell in love with farming.
When your dad passed away, because I think you say it was sudden.
Yeah. So what happened was, so then that's the next chapter. So the next chapter is, everything's going well. My mom is in the process of getting her doctorate degree, I believe in like 1982, 84. No, it's her master's degree. She's getting her master's degree in 82, 84.
In
music. So
music,
she's a longtime music teacher in Waterloo System. My dad was working at John Deere. They're raising 3 boys. And so, again, because my parents don't let grass grow under their feet, when we stopped farming the farm in New Sharon, my dad said, okay, now what else can I do? So then he says, you know what? I think I should run Chicago marathons. so he would work at John Deere, raise his 3 boys, farm their 40 acres. And then also my mom's an opera singer. So we would be traveling around watching her sing. So at any moment I could be in church clothes, school clothes, farm clothes, or clothes to go to opera.
Oh, you have all of them in the bag.
All of them in the bag. Yeah. So, he every October he would train, or he would go run the Chicago Marathon. So what he would do is he would go to work all day, come home, eat with the family, do a little bit of farming, take care of the kids, and about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, he would go ride his bike to the local track, and he would train, and then come home, be home by 11 o'clock, get up, be at work by 6 a.m., and do it all over again the next day. So that was his routine for several years. He ran 13 marathons.
Oh, wow.
He ran 13 Chicago marathons. Now, granted, he wasn't a blaze runner. He just did it to stay in shape.
Yeah.
And his biggest crowning moment of that when he broke the 4-hour mark. Keeping in mind that, he didn't have the marathon life. He didn't eat the right things.
Yeah.
He didn't train every day, but he trained enough to compete. And his personal goal was to get it under 4 hours. And he did get it under 4 hours. And so that was a big deal. So on this one particular day, it's just like any other day, worked all day, came home. He was helping my brother move, talking to the family, and said about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, he goes to ride his bike to train. And then unfortunately, my mom wakes up about 2 a.m. He's not there. And then about 4 hours later, about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, we get that dreaded knock at the door. But the police officers saying that they had found my father. He had misnavigated a construction site on his bicycle, and at night. And then the worst part is it was like literally 6 blocks from our house. So that was that's in another chapter. I call that the devastation chapter. And so there you have to.
How old was he?
He was 9 months from retirement and 1 week from his 65th birthday.
And how old were you?
I was 41.
Okay.
Actually, I was 41. I was 41. And so that's when all of our lives changed for real, because he was a huge factor. I mean, he was bigger than life to us, to the community, to John Deere, to the farming world. And so when you take somebody like that out, it left a huge hole in our family.
Were you at home? When did you?
So at that particular moment, my baby brother Adam was in Waterloo living. I'm living up here in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And my other brother Chris is living in Waterloo. So I'm the only one living here in Minneapolis. And so you get that dreaded call, and it was so unexpected. Like, we always talk like, he should have died in a farming accident or a John Deere. And to die silly like that on a bicycle in a construction zone is just unfathomable to think that way.
But again, we don't know how we're going to go. That's another thing.
We don't. But what's important, and I think what's important is how you react to it. Mm-hmm. Initially, we didn't react the best. We were lost. But, my mom is a strong faith woman, and, she got us together, and I remember the funeral happened on his birthday, actually, August 6th. And then after the funeral, my brother and I looked at each other and said, holy crap, there's still a crop in the field. Because remember, he planted it in April, and then you're so distraught and your mind is blown that you're like, the business is still there. Yeah. There's still corn in the field that we have to get out. So that's when, the next chapter comes in 2008. From 2008 to 2015, the family banded together and we kept the farm going. And, mom comes out of retirement and she manages the business side of the farm, and me and my brothers and my son, we handle the actual farm, the operation of it. And it works well from 2008 to 2015. And then it was at that time, 2015, we realized that, Dad did it a certain way, but we had to change it a little bit to accommodate, 1, our work schedule, 2, our profit model, because he made way more money at that time than we ever did. So he could absorb losses. We couldn't. We weren't in a position to absorb losses. So we need to make this farm a little bit more efficient, a little bit more profitable. So my mom, God led her to a lot of great state agencies in Iowa. Iowa State Extension Office, FSA, NRCS, USDA, to help with cost sharing programs, to help with guidance, put her in front of people that could help her. And then we became better stewards of the land, meaning that we were more conscious of how much we tilled, how much nutrients we put in the ground.
Was your father exposed to all these things, or he was doing the way he was trained
He was doing it the way he was trained. Chemicals, tilling the land, all that stuff.
So he was not going outside.
Right. No, the climate people, they would not like the way my father farmed back in the day. But that's just how it was back in the day. In the 40s, 50s, 60s, you nuked it and tried to, it was all about, but like I said, my mom, she really took charge and got us in the right position to make those decisions, that affected the climate, environment, our profit, our time. So in 2015, we switched to, no-till programs, cost share programs, reducing the amount of chemicals we put in the ground. Then from there, what happens is the yield started to become better because we start farming better, and we realized that we didn't have to do a lot of the things that farmers before us did.
So that you would probably call that the new way of farming chapter.
Exactly.
Completely something different than how you think your pops will react to that. If it will pops in 2015,
if he was around, he was like, you can't do it that way, you can't do it this way. But he was a smart enough man to know, okay, we'll try it.
Yeah.
Because to be honest with you, no-till is no fun for a farmer, because there's no better feeling in the world to get in your big, powerful John Deere tractor and dig up the dirt for 2 or 3 days in a row. That's the beauty. That's why I fell in love with farming. So now, literally, you don't do that anymore. So that kind of takes a lot of the fun out of it.
Yeah. Oh man! So your pops passed away in 2008. Okay. Now, that's what you guys had to experience from a farming perspective. What about from the personal perspective as a son? Was he the mentor? Was he the guy you will call when you're trying to get some direction, some guidance in life?
He was all that. He was all that and then some. At his funeral, one of his coworkers said it best. He was tough but fair. He didn't allow
That's hard balance.
Yeah, he was tough but fair, and he didn't allow too much feeling sorry for yourself. Him and my mom's mantra was always, you got to get where the work is. And if we ever got hurt or something on the farm or whatever, he's like, we don't have time for your personal business. We got to get. So he was pretty tough. He was a tough dude. It affected the family. So what happened is, prior to his death, I literally was enjoying life. Like life was great.
Yeah.
He was about 9 months from retirement. He was probably going to do the farming full time, and he was talking about expanding the farm and doing all these wonderful things. And at the time, I was playing semi-pro football. He was coming to all my games in Minnesota, New Jersey, Texas. He was following me all around.
Oh, okay.
And so that life was absolutely wonderful. So when he went, I went through my own spiritual journey, and I said to myself, if he can go as tough as nails as he was, and he can go a week before his birthday, 9 months before his retirement, before he's really going to really enjoy life, it cemented to me that life is fragile and you don't have time to waste.
Yes.
So at that point, when he died, I really started living. Now when I wake up, I take mental pictures the entire day.
Yeah.
Sunsets, thunderstorms, birds, cropland, tractors, because nothing is promised tomorrow.
That's true.
So I make every move I make intentional. I make every relationship I have intentional, and I'm attentive to it. And so because he never got to the point where he could, there's other phase of when you have a father-son relationship, when you get older, there's a whole nother conversation you have that I didn't get to have with him.
Yeah.
Right. And so I began really living when he passed. And so then as I began to live, this is when another chapter comes in, and that is my son, who was pretty close to my dad, started sending me these videos of the plight of the black farmer. And as a farmer, you're pretty much isolated anyway, but then when you're a black farmer, you're really isolated because you don't really, because my father's whole attitude when we had farms is like, he didn't really tell a lot of people, because if you're too productive, then they're after you. If you're not as productive, then they make fun of you. So you just keep quiet about it, right?
Stay out of the way.
Right, because there's always white judgment.
Yeah.
How did you get the farm? Who gave you the farm? Why do you have the farm?
Did you earn it?
Did you earn it?
Yeah.
Do you work for somebody? So dad just wanted to be quiet about it. So that's the way I was raised. So I never really told a lot of people about it. But then my son, being the next generation, his generation is not quiet. And so he sent me videos of YouTube videos of the plight of the black farmer. And I had no idea.
Yeah.
Zero.
Because like you say, it's so quiet. Everybody just living in their own little world.
I only knew one other black farmer when I grew up, and that was Mike Cook, who was our neighbor. And he actually worked at John Deere too. His dad worked with my dad. So that's the only other black farmer I really knew. And so when he sent me that, it clicked. If I'm going to live, I'm going to acknowledge my heritage, my legacy, and I'm going to uplift my father and his sister's contribution to this Western legacy. So what I did was I just started telling my story. You are part of the long list of individuals that have reached out to me to understand our story. It all started because I just told my story. And then one person picked it up and they ran a story in the Cedar Rapids Gazette, Aaron Jordan. They followed us from February to November, every aspect of farming, the breakdowns, the good days, the bad days. Yeah. They followed us for an entire year. I believe it was 2022. And from there, people started noticing, there's a black farmer in Iowa. So I started getting calls. Tell me more. Tell me more. And from 2022 till now, I have met the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. I've met senators. I've met other black farmers. And this is how it all started. So once the story hit, P.J. Haney, who is a major farmer down in Virginia, about 10,000 acres, he actually was in a conference in Arizona speaking on agriculture. And there was a white lady from Iowa in this conference. And they got to talking, and she said, I'm from Iowa. And he said, do you know any black farmers in Iowa? And she said, I don't know any black farmers in Iowa. Well, when she gets back, about 2 weeks later, that story broke on the Cedar Rapids Gazette about the Western family farm. She calls him and says, hey, I found this farmer.
One, yeah.
And then he and I got to talking. And then from there, it just took off like a whirlwind.
Wow. Wow.
And so I started meeting other black farmers. And so from there, I said, you know what? I need to uplift this farm and acknowledge its legacy. I had the fortune of my son and I going to what they call the Harvest Ball in Raleigh, North Carolina. Darrell Tenney with Farmers Outreach puts on this ball. And I went down there. And it was a spiritual journey for me and my son. It blew my mind because there was 300 black farmers of varying successes from 100 acres to 15,000 acres.
Wow. Something you never seen it.
Never seen, never even thought of, never even thought it was possible.
Wow.
So it was a 3-day conference that ended in a black tie affair. I mean, I get goosebumps every time I think about it. I'm so glad that my son was there with me to see that. So we've been at the Harvest Ball every year. This year will be its 4th year. That first year when I came back, and then I went to the second year, I was so moved. I said, I've got to do this for the people up north. So I got to bring the northern farmers together, specifically the Iowa. So I created the Iowa Farmers of Color Conference. And so I brought together, so it was my job. Now, mind you, I have my own job. I'm coaching high school football. I am raising a family, and I work a corporate job during the day. But yet I put together this Iowa Farmers of Color in Iowa with the intent of networking.
When you are going for your purpose, you don't even know you're busy.
And that's when I learned that term. What's the term? I found out my why. It was my why moment. You know, I'd done a lot of great things in my life that I thought, but this one was personal. This one was deep.
So you think your why is bringing
right? And if you think about
black farmers.
My degree is in communication. I love networking. I love building relationships. And so my goal was to, when I read the census in 2017, it said there was only 10 black farmers in the state of Iowa. So I said, well, how can it be to find 10 black farmers? So happy to say that not only did I find farmers, I planned for 25. By the time it was done, through the gracious help of Practical Farmers of Iowa, I found 116 farmers that attended my first conference. We had fruits and vegetable farmers, microgreen farmers, traditional row crop farmers, all in one room.
Wow.
It was mind-blowing.
Wow.
And the main thing is, number one, to know each other, network, build that community. Number two, make connections between the farmers and those allies companies, because it's always been viewed that from the company's perspective, we don't know where the black farmers are. And from the black farmers' perspective, they're not really interested in us because we're too small, right? So I'm going to dismantle that. I'm going to bring everybody together. So now the Cargills, John Deere, Syngentas can say, hey, we see you, we acknowledge you. Here's some programs that we have that you might be benefited from. Mm-hmm. And now those farmers can make those kinds of connections and feel part of the bigger community.
Oh, yeah. And the conversation you had, you and your brother Chris with Abena Sankofa, one of the things your brother pointed out, what he just said is, farming is just farming, even if you farm in the back of your house.
Yes.
Yeah, if you have just the garden, that's farming. And that's, you're right, because that's probably sometimes people be like, I'm not a farmer. I don't need to go to attend to this thing.
Right.
I only got a little garden in the backyard. I don't want to go sit there with Todd. They got 200 acres.
Right.
What am I going to contribute?
Right.
So I think that's a great thing, because sometimes it can start on your backyard and slowly you can be like, oh, I can increase this thing.
And just on that same theme, that's the reason why I created, because there are farmers conventions like this, but they're 99.9% all white. And so as a person of color, you feel intimidated to go in there because, like you said, I only have 200 acres. These guys got big equipment. They got thousands of acres. And then when you get to those conferences, you get the questions of, again, is it yours? How'd you get it?
Yeah.
When did you get it? How big is it? And so you don't feel really comfortable. So that's why I called it, I made sure I did not call it Black Farmers of Iowa. I called it Farmers of Color because I want to include white, black, Asian, Mexican, the whole works.
Yeah.
But it's a special call out that people of color will feel comfortable to come to this conference, and they won't be judged on what they grow, whether it's in the backyard, whether they're on 1,000 acres or 10,000 acres.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you found your purpose?
I knocked on the door of this purpose. I opened it. There's a lot to do. And that's what's exciting about it. It's like, I found my purpose, but now let me really develop this. Let me really develop this.
Yeah. From 1864 until today, how much you think the farming changed?
Farming in general changed because now we're wiser as a human race to say we cannot, and I say nuke the ground like we used to, meaning putting anhydrous, putting all these chemicals in the ground to get profit. Yeah. Because there is a limitation to what the ground is going to take. And you see that in some fields where, the physical chemistry of the dirt will change. The landscape of the dirt will change. Mm-hmm. So we have to be better stewards of the land. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the biggest difference now, is that we're aware that we can't do it like Granddad did it. We had to be more cautious. And then what we've realized, especially on our farm, when you do the no-till, when you do the reduced, what they call inputs, meaning the chemicals that go in the ground, you actually increase your yield and the soil gets healthier. Mm-hmm. So when the soil gets healthier, the yield gets healthier. And the other thing we realize in our particular case is that you learn, when you really start to understand dirt, as it were, it doesn't need Mother Nature does not need your help. So we keep thinking, we got to make this seed grow better, bigger, brighter. You really don't. Mother Nature, at the end of the day, can do just fine. But as humans, we want it bigger, faster, and more profitable.
Oh, yeah.
And miraculously, in the 6 years that we've been in the no-till program, the nutrient program, on the 40 acres, it's not the best soil. Yeah. And we've actually seen the improvement in the soil because we touch it less and we let Mother Nature, let it heal itself.
Yeah. Growing up in Waterloo back then and today, what do you think is the biggest change in the black family?
What is the biggest change in the black family in Waterloo?
Yeah. In general, from the way you guys grew up to today?
Not to be political, but I just think the black family was severely affected in the 80s with the crack epidemic, with the way blacks were preyed upon through the drugs, the alcohol, liquor store in every store.
Yep.
I think it was thrust upon us. You de-industrialize these major cities, Chicago, Detroit. The black middle class was very, very strong when there was industrialization was in those major cities.
Yeah.
But once you take that out and then you don't allow us to move into those suburbs, then we're left in the city.
Yeah.
And then and the resources are gone, then things happen. And it didn't work out well for us in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm.
So using that as a somewhat of a starting point, the black family's been shattered to a certain extent. When I grew up, as I mentioned before, I grew up in Waterloo. It was one of the best, I call it the Black Mayberry. From my recollection, it was, 50-50. It was 50% black, 50% white. Yes, we had our issues for sure. But in my particular neighborhood, we had all races and we rode our bikes, skateboards. We played in parks. Everybody had a job. All my uncles worked at John Deere. All my aunts, Charlene, Joyce, Betty, they worked in the school system. We went on vacation every summer. 2 cars in the driveway. It was just great. It was great.
Wow. Talking about vacation every summer, that's one thing. We don't do it anymore. And I mean, times have changed and things are a little bit tight.
And not to mention the fact, my father paid for all 3 of us to go to college.
Oh, really?
So my brother went to UNI. I went to University of Iowa. My baby brother went to Grandview, and we all had private high school educations.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We did what we set out to do. There were some bumps along the way, but we did. At the end of the day, as we sit here today, we're right where we need to be.
Man, if you have to describe your father in one word, what would that be?
One word.
Yeah.
If I had 2 or 3, tough but fair.
Okay.
But just, he's that dude. He's that dude. Like he was just that dude.
And of course, he probably grew up tough too.
Yeah.
So that's probably the only thing. And those guys back then is a super alpha male.
Oh, there you go. Now that you bring that up, he alpha. He is an alpha for sure. Yeah. He was an alpha for sure.
Yeah. How many Todds? You are Todd the third?
I'm Todd the third.
The third.
And there's a Todd the fifth who is 2 years old, my grandson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And your father was Todd the second. And his father was
Todd the first.
The original Todd.
Yeah.
160 years is a very long time. Mm-hmm. But also that can go down the drain just like that.
Just like that.
It's like you might be one generation away for somebody to say, man, screw all this dirt.
Yep. Exactly.
Give me the cash.
Exactly.
And I want to wash my hands and move to California.
There you go.
How do you protect that?
By executing my why. And what I mean by that is, Joyce Cook, Charlie Montgomery, Betty Smith, my dad, Todd, and then you go back to the others. This is my leg of the race.
Yeah.
As I mentioned chapters, it could be the leg of the race. My aunts did a great job on the leg of the race. It's my turn to take the leg of the race. And if nothing else, even if nobody in our family farms, I just want them to know, number one, the legacy. Number two, the business of farming. You can still own the farm, run the business farm, and not put your hand in the dirt. So that's what I'm doing to ensure that they don't just say, okay, grandpa's dead, let's sell this, because they could become instant millionaires. Mm-hmm. The way price land, the price of land is today, you become an instant millionaire. Mm-hmm. However, during the journey, like what I'm doing with you and the newspapers, I try to bring them along with me so they can see, they can hear, and they can feel. So that way, if they try to come to that decision, at least they're thinking about other things than just the cash. And in every family, if you got multiple kids, there's always going to be one kid that doesn't want to farm. Like my baby brother, he appreciates the farm, he likes the farm, but he's not the farmer, and that's fine. But somebody's got to be. And so, apparently God has chosen me and my brother Chris, and now my son. We're going to do our best to just uplift it, make sure it's part of history, and we're doing our best to archive it. So then what happens is when my grandson and his grandson, when they hear about farms, what I'm working on is creating a sophisticated system that will always live in perpetuity, so they can always go back and see that, hey, here's an interview with Todd and Erick. Here's a picture of grandfather in 1800. Here's a picture of 1900. So it's always there, because to get to this point with you, I had to do a lot of research. My mom did a lot of research. So I don't want them to have to do all that research, because you have to do all the research and you kind of give up. So I want it to be readily available for them.
And the fact that if they understand that this thing started in 1864, the guy who decided to do it was a former slave. That alone can make you appreciate something and go like, if this guy woke up today and just find out I'm just want to sell this thing for cash,
right?
How would he feel?
Right.
Depression time, 1930s.
Right.
How did they survive it?
I think about that. I don't know. I mean, I do know that in those days, if you lived on a farm, you didn't really need for much, because anything you need, you grew. So them running out of food was not going to be an option, because they had all the food right there.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good insulator against the depression.
Interesting. Because I know some farmers just give up their land.
Yes. From my knowledge, what I suspect is that if you don't have to go to the grocery store and pay those high prices, and everything you have is, because they grew cows, pigs, chickens. They had a huge garden. So as far as food, they wouldn't want it for anything. And then, as my dad would tell it, he had 2 pair of shoes, 4 pair of jeans, and 6 shirts. And if they got a hole in it, grandma could mend it. So they wouldn't want for clothes. So now you got, and then you didn't need gas because you weren't going to the mall. And so I think, farming was probably a good insulator against that.
Yeah. Did they ever go to the grocery store to get anything?
I'm sure they did, for, the salts and the peppers and the ketchups and things of that nature. I mean, my grandmother had this, I call it the underground cave, because she would do canning. It was this thing you'd walk down underground, and she had this huge canning area that she would do. So, I mean, like I said, they wanted for nothing.
Yeah. So the food was coming from the farm to the table.
Farm to table. Real deal.
Do you think we have a chance to get back to that?
I think there is a strong push to that today with the new millennials. And you read all the time where people work in the corporate world, especially in New York, and they just give it up. A successful job in IT or finance, and they go upstate New York and they just buy a 10-acre farm and they just work it, because they just want to get out of that rat race, and they just want to work it. The beauty of my life is that I'm able to do both. So when I get too stressed out in the corporate world, and then what I'm doing here, I just go down to the farm, and we have a house down there as well. I can go down there and hang out down there, be one with nature.
When did we go off the rail with organic food and going to box food?
Well, see, now that's that'd be good, but as much as there's a push for organic, and which is the reason that is, I believe, is because you have a lot of corporate farmers. Not all of them are bad, but there's a tendency to, when you're just trying to farm for dollars, you farm for dollars and you do whatever it takes to get it out. Meaning you nuke it, you spray it. It goes from the farm to 4 different distribution centers. So by the time it gets to you, a lot of nutrients are gone. You have irresponsibility when it comes to farming, because, you're not supposed to do certain things to fruits and vegetables that you eat. Some farmers, not all, some are doing that, which is why I believe that you have, the increase of cancers here and there, the increase of illnesses here and there, because the food is just not safe.
And that was my next question.
Right. And that's why people are going back to trying to get back to, growing their own fruits and vegetables, which is why there's a big push now from society to state agencies to say, hey, help us get access to land so that we can grow good, healthy food. which is why if you look around, especially in Minnesota, there's huge farmers market network here, which my son is part of councils on the food markets where he actually grows microgreens. So he has his own farm business. He successfully has a business where they grow microgreens, and he supplies a lot of the restaurants downtown Minneapolis.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good. How would you advise people how to eat healthy? Or even when they go to the grocery store to buying vegetables, everybody today say their food is organic.
Not true.
How do you tell somebody, non-farm person, to separate the real one from the fake?
One, we have to understand it's extremely hard. Me personally, when I go, it's frustrating because you look and you think, okay, they said this, this, and this. Okay, I'll try it. But then you'll hear later like, well, they said it's this free, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that. But if you read the fine print, in order for them to say that, it's just a reduced percent. It still has it.
Yeah.
It's just to have an overwhelming.
Yeah.
So, but you're still getting it. But as a consumer, you're trying to get to the grocery store, to get home, to feed. You don't have time to sit there and read and digest everything that's on that package. I think the government should have the USDA should have better footprint in there in enforcing those rules.
Yeah.
Because we're only poisoning ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I'm not the expert. I'm just a consumer like anybody else. But we got to get better at monitoring the organizations that produce our food.
Is that, I'm thinking out loud, is that the opportunity the Iowa Farmers of Color Conference kind of can help us to understand where to get it, where not to get it? I mean, not necessarily where not to get it, but where to get the good, the real stuff.
Yes, because what happens is as you come together, you start to create coalitions, alliances, and you may have...
Because we are dying out here, Todd.
We're dying out here.
We're dying
absolutely.
out here.
And so what happens is a couple of things happen. These individuals that have gardens in their backyard, that have huge gardens, that have farms, they're able to come. We have the state agencies, we have ambassadors that come and say, what is your need?
Yeah.
They say, we need more space to grow healthier food. There's programs. The other thing, there may be other nonprofit organizations that come to this to say, hey, we are doing a CSA program where we want to hand out baskets of food to food pantries or to the homeless or to K through 12 programs. They then partner with people like my son or DeQuan Campbell, who's out of Waterloo, who runs those programs, to say, hey, you have the fruit, I have the access to the K through 12, let's work together. So then, boom, there you go.
So partner with the small farmers.
Yep.
Okay. Is it possible today to do what your great-great-grandfather did in 1864?
As far as what?
Coming in Iowa and buy 160 acres?
Oh, no.
No?
Well, one, you have to look at land prices.
I'm sure the price today was probably the same price back then, is it? In comparison?
Land prices in Iowa are pretty high. I'm not a finance person to make that correlation. All I know is that, Black Hawk County, where our farm is one of the highest price per acre in the state of Iowa. We're talking, Mahaska County, I believe, is like $7,000 to $10,000 an acre. You get some that go to, $15,000 to $20,000.
Wow!
And so, price of land is pretty high.
Yeah.
Now, if you're buying, there's not too many lots that people are selling 1 acre, 5 acres, 10 acres. Then you also have to understand farms are being replaced. The term is replaced by cement. Where I sit here in Maple Grove, when I first moved out here in Maple Grove, Minnesota, 13 years ago, majority of this area out here was farms. Now you look around, it's apartment complexes, huge distribution centers. New corporations are moving out here.
Yeah.
So now all the farm is gone. And so
what's the danger with that?
The danger with that is you lose the flexibility and the ability to grow your own food, number one. Number two, a wise old farmer told me, he said, you got to keep your land because you can't make any more of it. Once you take it, you can't go back.
Yeah.
So if we continue the trend with no marks along the path to say, okay, if we get to this point, we're in a danger zone. Right now, as a society, we just consume, bigger, better, faster. So now, the millennials coming in, they want to live in these spread out areas, or so these areas are being developed, but with no regard of what is the consequence if we keep doing this. So it's a hard balance. I don't have the answer to it, but what I do know is this: if we keep on the trend we're doing now, and there's a number that shows the trends of, if you go Google it, it'll show you at the pace that we're consuming farmland. Farmland has a date and an end date to the extent that we know today. Now, granted, where we have our farm in Iowa, I would be hard-pressed to think that they're going to do development there because we are in the deep part of the country of farmland in Iowa. But here in the hinterlands of the city, their farmland is going away. To cropland, statewide, in 2023, the average price per acre was $9,250.
Wow.
In Black Hawk County, where our farm is, it's $14,000 an acre. And in Mahaska County, where our 160-acre farm is $10,000 an acre. 58% of the land in Iowa in 2023 was leased.
Wow.
We've got to put more thought into how we want this to look. I mean, yes, expansion is good. Yes, building that house out in the middle of the country is good. But there is a cost. There's a cost to everything you do in life.
Yeah. And like you say, it's not like you can say, okay, 3 of us, let's team up and buy 1 acre.
Right.
Rarely somebody's going to be selling 1 acre.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's like it's a serious cash.
Right.
You need to have.
Right, but at the same time, there are those feel good stories where you'll get a farmer who actually it was a white guy that attended our Farmers of Color, which is an interesting note. If we can go back just a second, we talked about why develop the Iowa Farmers of Color. Some individuals are like, well, why is it just for people of color? Again, the reason I didn't name it Iowa Black Farmers of Iowa Color, because I wanted everybody to be there. So you'll get white farmers that will call me and say, hey, is it okay if I come to your conference? And I say, absolutely it is. Why wouldn't it be? Well, because I said Iowa Farmers of Color. Now you know how it feels sometimes when we go to the regular conferences and we get the side eye of why we're there, how we're there. We want everybody to feel welcome at the Iowa Farmers of Color because everybody's welcome. And not only will we feel welcome, but you'll be made to feel comfortable while you're there. That's the difference. So then one of the white farmers that attended last year, he really, really wanted to, he was getting out of farming. He didn't want to sell it, but he didn't want to sell it to another established farmer. He wanted to sell it to an up-and-coming farmer, black, white, or indifferent. But he could not find a farmer at 35, 40 years old, a young, new beginning farmer to do that. So I'm trying to help him with that, but there are those farmers that want to do that as well. And he's down in the Des Moines area of Iowa.
This idea of farmland turning to cement is a little bit nerve-wracking for me. Because the population keep growing, which means the need for food also is going to keep growing. But if we continuously get rid of the land, the farm, and we're building properties, what does that say for our future need of food? Where we're going to get the food from? If the farmland is shrinking, the population is growing.
Now you get what I'm saying. Besides me and you, who else is saying that has the impactful power to say, hey, we need to slow down. Hey, we need to not do this area.
Yeah.
You're right. That's why I say the government needs to be heavily involved. The USDA has to be heavily involved to say, we're going to cap this.
Yeah.
So.
Because otherwise we're going to need to manufacture food some other ways.
Right.
To feed the people.
But they also, as you see on the news sometimes, they manufacture hamburgers in the lab now, and they manufacture this and chicken. And I mean, me personally, I don't. There's no better lover, natural person in the world than Mother Nature herself. If you leave Mother Nature alone, she will take care of you. If you mistreat her, she will take care of you.
Oh yeah. Don't play with God.
Right. So to me, that's that human arrogance and audacity. Like I know more than Mother Nature. I can do better than Mother Nature. No, you cannot do better than Mother Nature.
Yep.
You produce that in the lab does not have natural ingredients. Those are manufactured ingredients.
Yeah, and that's what kills us. That's what they popping off for all these type of diseases that we probably never seen it before. Now you're gonna make me think about that stuff a lot.
So don't go eating McDonald's on your way home.
No, I usually don't. I'm staying away from it. Well, Todd, anything else you want to add to our conversation? What is your message?
One thing I've on this journey is learn soil. YouTube, what is soil? Yeah. How does soil live? Because at the end of the day, it's Mother Nature. So learn about soil, learn about the different weeds, learn these things because you're learning about earth. Number two, you learn how to grow better food that's good for you. And number three, you can pass it on to your children because how many of us adults and children walk through a field and they have no idea what's in there? Back in our day, we knew dandelions, we knew milkweed, we knew all these things, but now the kids will walk through there and may not even know what they're walking through, and that's a shame.
Yeah, that's true. Man, thanks very much for your time, Todd.
Absolutely.
Man,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, that was Todd Western, man, from Western Family Farm in Waterloo.
Waterloo and New Sharon, Iowa.
Yeah, New Sharon, Iowa. Thanks for your time, Todd.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.